today's topic is the State of the Union address. So State of the Union address is something that I started to do as a real estate investor back in 2008, when everyone was saying, when is this terrible market going to be over, right? We're ready to start going again. So before that, no one was really asking about market updates or anything like that, because the market was going up, everything was wonderful. But after that, everyone wanted to know when the market was going to change. And I think we are in a not dissimilar time frame right now, specifically because of the way that interest rates are affecting us as real estate investors and in real estate in general. So we'll just do a very quick review of 2022. So 2022 started super strong, right? It was the best of times, and then by the time we got to the end of 2022, it was the worst of times, right? So it ended very weak. Full year sales in Texas were down 11.4%. The average price, however, was still up. It was up 10.7%. How do you find yourself in a situation where sales are down by 11%, but average price is still up by almost 11%? How do you find yourself in a situation like that? What's the driver of that? What's the cause of that? What can make something like this happen? What sets prices? Economics, supply and demand, right? When you still have demand and you still don't have very much supply, right? You're still going to be in a position, even if demand is starting to weaken, that you're going to be in a position where you're still going to have prices increase. So that was one of the things that really helped us as we were ending out the year of 2022. So if you look at the first half of 2022, the sales were up 13.2% and the price was up 14.4%. So to go from the first half being up 13.2% to the last half being down on average or the second half being down on average over 20%, that's how we got to sales down just over 11% last year. The price held pretty steady in spite of the fact that sales were dropping. Now, the price was not up at the same rate that it was up, for example, for 2021, but it still held very strong there. And I think for much of Texas, it's going to continue to hold strong as well. So what we saw is that as interest rates increase, sales volume dropped, and this was just dividing the total volume drop by the total change in interest rates. So for every 100 basis point increase in interest rates, we saw a 7.5% decrease in the sales volume, right? And the rate of the price increases that we had been seeing, because in some cases in 2021, 2022, we were seeing up to 20+% increases in year-over-year sales. So as those interest rates started to increase, those pressures also started to moderate the sales prices. So moderate, that's not a euphemism for drop in most markets, but in many markets it did slow down into the low single digits. And some markets like Austin, it actually went a little negative there. So what that looked like is by the end of 2022, sales volume was down throughout Texas by 30%. So the last few months of 2022, we saw year-over-year sales volumes down 30%. And we saw those prices up, but they were only up in that 3% range. So those low single-digit numbers as opposed to being in the teens, for example, in terms of growth. So that was how so far these interest rates have affected us. Now, going from a 2.5% interest rate, and I've talked to people who have gotten below 2 interest rates, 3% interest rate to a 6.5%, 7% interest rate, obviously has had that serious effect on volume. I think I don't know. I know that the Fed is going to continue to raise interest rates. The issue is none of us know exactly at what level they're going to stop. They had a target in mind, but I think this past week they've blew past that original target, and they're expected to blow past that original target as they continue to monitor inflation. So as a real estate investor, and after 20 years of investing, I've never said to myself, like, my success as a real estate investor is going to depend on inflation. That never really came out of my mouth for the last 20 years, right? And part of that reason is because when we've had interest rate increases and or interest rate decreases, did we see them at the same pace that we've seen them over the last 9 months? And the answer is no. So it was the extreme increase and the speed of increase and the amount of the increase is not something that we've seen in the last 20 years. So that's one of the big changes as well. The reason why prices are still holding is, again, the basic law of economic supply and demand. Inventory is still low. So right now inventory is in that 3-month range of inventory. So for many of you guys are very familiar with that concept of days on market, right? Days on market, and most of you guys are probably confused about days on market, but days on market is not from when it went on the market to when it actually sold, but from when it went on the market to when it went under contract. So they take out the under contract to sale piece, because this can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months, right? Depending on the loan, depending on any issues with title, etc. But many of you guys may not be as familiar with the concept of months of inventory. So months of inventory basically says if we stopped listing houses today, based on the buyer demand that we've had over the last 12 months, how quickly would we eliminate all of the inventory, get down to zero? And based on the buyer demand that we've had over the last 12 months, based on the inventory we currently have on hand in the MLS, we've got about a 3-month supply of inventory. So some of you guys will say, okay, well, that's great. What does that mean? Well, let me make it relative to you so you can understand what that means. So the 40-year average here in Texas is a months of inventory of about 6 months supply of inventory. So even though our sales have slowed down, we're still at about half of the inventory of where we normally are at. About half the inventory of where we normally are at. And they call 6 months of inventory market equilibrium, right? So it's not really a buyer's market, it's not really a seller's market. Now, anything less than 3 months, definitely a seller's market. Some parts of the market in Texas last year, this time, were at a 2-week supply of inventory, not even a 1-month supply of inventory. So when you get into a 2-week supply of inventory range, what's happening with prices? They are going up like crazy, and that's what we saw this same time last year. So right now, 3 months, still technically a seller's market, although if you ask a lot of realtors, it certainly doesn't feel that way. It certainly feels like it went like a switch flipped from being a situation where sellers had all the control, where every house was getting multiple offers above list price the same day it was listed, no option period, sometimes even sight unseen, to a situation where buyers had more control. So that's the situation we find ourselves in right now. And then as sales volume continues to recede and inventory continues to grow, at some point we will start to see some decrease in those sales prices, especially in the markets that got probably the most overheated. Which market in Texas do you think got the most overheated? It'd be the market you're sitting in tonight. It'd be the Austin market, okay? In fact, we already saw Austin give back some of its gains and I'll show you what those looked like in December. So let's talk a little bit about the forecast. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I wrote this down. It's not hyperbole. It's not an exaggeration. I think we'll continue to see that 30% reduction in year-over-year sales volume. Now, we'll definitely see it for the first 6 months of 2023. We're definitely going to see that 30% reduction for the first 6 months of 2023. As we get into the last 6 months of 2023, that number will probably moderate a little bit, because the last 6 months of 2022, we started to see those 30% reductions versus 2021, right? So, but overall, my guess is it's going to be as low as 30%. I don't want to say Armageddon, but kind of, well, I mean, so we've had all these different kind of crazy times over the last 3 years, right? And we had Snowmageddon and Snowvid, or however you guys want to call it, and then last year it was all the 2 years ago this time was all the cars like everywhere, like on the side of the road, and this year it was Treemageddon. So I think it's going to be a sales volume Mageddon as we go into 2023. But what is going to save our butts, which did not save our butts last time, and by last time I'm talking specifically about the Great Recession, is the fact that we just don't have enough inventory to even support the reduced buyer demand that we have today. So, and I do think we will see that reduction in that inventory growth as well. So last time the builders could not put the brakes on fast enough. The builders could not put the brakes on fast enough. This time the builders really have put the brakes on very quickly, and I'll show you what that looks like in terms of building permits in the next slide. But there's also something else that's kind of beautiful about this market that we didn't get to experience in the last market cycle. So last market cycle, interest rates were somewhere between, for most investors, were somewhere between 7%, 8%, maybe 9%. This time, many of the people who are the what I would call the would-be sellers, what are their interest rates? 3%, 4%. I read a statistic that 70% of the loans that are in place in the United States today are below 4% interest. So what happens when the market slows down and you have a property that you have a 3, 4, 5% interest rate on? What do you do? What do you do? What did you say? You sit on it. Could you sit on it as easily when interest rates were 7, 8, 9%? You couldn't cash flow. You couldn't sit on it in cash flow. This is a time where you can sit on it in cash flow. So a would-be seller is now I'm a landlord today, right? I'm a landlord today. So that's where we're seeing a lot, I'm an Airbnb superhost today, right? So that's what you are going to be seeing. That's what you are going to be be seeing. Although I would challenge you guys, any of you guys who are thinking about Airbnb, there's a hashtag that you got to check out, which is Airbnb bust. What? Airbnb bust? Why would that happen? Inflation? People not wanting to spend money? Oversaturation. Now everyone is an Airbnb host, right? So the statistics, so there's a company that specifically tracks statistics for Airbnbs. And what they've said is Airbnb volume, rental nights, is actually up year over year. But because we have so many new hosts, each individual's volume is down. So the people that were sold out for months and months, they're getting hit disproportionately than the people who are just putting their properties on the market. So before you think, I'm going to be an Airbnb expert, and before you invest $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in furniture, just be aware of that. Just do a search, Airbnb bust, because that's something that's trending right now. So we will see a growth in inventory, which will put that months of inventory number up. We will see growth in inventory to put that months of inventory up. And I do think we're going to have anywhere from a 5 to 10% reduction in sales price as we end 2023 and as we're comparing it to 2022. Primarily because the first half of 2022 was an absolute fever pitch in terms of the average price kicking up, was an absolute fever pitch in terms of the little volume, the little inventory that we had. But because the builders have pulled back the reins so hard, that's going to keep us in an months of inventory situation that's going to be manageable for us, right? It's going to be manageable for us. And that's why the sales price reduction is not going to be as much as the volume reduction that we're seeing. So again, what does this assume? So this assumes that we'll see interest rates go from the 6.5% to probably the 8% range. If interest rates go above 8%, then you can just take my presentation tonight and just kind of toss it away, because all bets may be off when we hit that 8%, that high mark there. This also assumes that interest rates will stay in that range for the rest of 2023. So what I'm trying to indicate from this standpoint is that we're probably not going to see interest rates go down, right? We're probably not going to see interest rates go down. We have someone who is very aggressive when it comes to fighting inflation right now, and is not going to be. Gosh, could you imagine being Fed Chairman Powell? Like, would you everyone probably does not like you right now. Think about it, right? And everyone probably wants to cancel you right now, and you're supposed to be independent politically, right? But it's kind of hard when you're also kind of dancing on this edge of trying not to create a recession while more than doubling interest rates in about a 6-month period, right? So he's got a job that I certainly don't envy for him at all. So what's our method? How do we make money, and how do we survive and thrive in 2023? So I'll put up some of the things that I'll notate for you. So owner financing is back. And what I love is I'm seeing it now more than ever in the MLS even. So even some of the agents are getting hip to the fact of, man, if I want to get it at my price, then I better provide terms, right? So for me as a real estate investor, I'll always pay your price if you will give me the terms that I need to be able to make this work. So if you were to go back and search in the MLS time machine a year ago, you probably saw about 1, maybe 2 properties that were listed with owner financing. If you go back in the MLS today, you'll probably see somewhere around 15 or 20, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's one of those things that kind of happens gradually and then all of a sudden, and then you'll see more people moving in this direction, and in some cases using that 2 to 3% existing interest rate that they have to be able to make numbers work. In fact, I was talking to another investor today, and they were asking me to help them analyze their deal, and they're like, I really wanted to get it at, the seller really wanted to sell it for a certain price, but he wanted all cash, $160,000 all cash. And he said, but I offered him $185,000, but I offered it to him at a 1% interest rate. And the guy said, what? Okay. So how long do you have to hold that property for that number to make sense? If you look at the amortization schedule on that, for example, buying it at $160,000 at a 7% interest rate versus buying it at $185,000 at a 1% interest rate, somewhere between year 7 and year 8, you owe less on paying more but getting that lower interest rate. So what does the investor that brought this deal to me have to do? He just has to hold it at least until year 8. And then guess what? He's in a good position. But what is he going to do? What is he going to do? He's going to take that owner finance mortgage that he has, and he's going to wrap it to someone else. So he's going to get an owner finance mortgage at 1%, and he's going to wrap it out at 10%. What is that called? Specialized knowledge, putting specialized knowledge to work. And that's something we're going to see more and more often. We will see more short sales. We will see more short sales. We'll see more foreclosures, but definitely not at the same rate that we saw, for example, in 08, 09, and 10. Many would-be sellers are going to be leasing their properties as long as they can cash flow. And if you have a 3% interest rate, and if you have a house that's below about $500,000, there's a high probability that you'll be able to cash flow. What I love about what builders have done this in this part of the market cycle is that they have reduced their inventory, which will definitely lessen the impact on the reduced total inventory, will lessen the impact on sales price. So new building permits were down 32% year over year, 2022 versus 2021. At 8,500 units. And then I went back into, and I think, so I went back to see how long has it been since we've had that few units. Since December of 2018 is the last time we had that. Yeah.
You know, are those Austin MSs?
These that I'm looking at are, I pulled this like about 3 weeks ago. I think, This is all of Texas. Yeah, I think this is all of Texas, yeah. So, but you can, so if you go to the Texas A&M Real Estate Center, so you can get all of the research on building permits. If I remember from when I went to go and look at it, they had the Texas data for 2022 month by month by month, but they did not have the individual markets data. They only had the year roll up, so they had 2021, but they didn't have the final number for 2022. Now, and honestly, I checked this about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, so they could have that out there. But with Texas A&M Real Estate Center, when it comes to the building permits, I noticed that there's, they don't just, there's a little bit of lag there. And I mean, you guys keep doing what you're doing. If you're listening, you guys are amazing. I can accept the lag just because their data is probably the best data that's out there. They live, breathe, sleep real estate in Texas. So if you guys are looking for data, it's a great place to check. But that's one of the things that's going to really help us in 2023 as real estate investors and as a real estate market as a whole, because this is a big disruption, right? So your job as an entrepreneur and as real estate investors, we are all entrepreneurs, is to find the disruption in the market, come up with a solution for that disruption, put a process, a system around it so you can hand it to somebody else to do for you while you're heads up looking for the next disruption. Because, life is a series of disruptions. So if there's one thing that you can guarantee yourself is this quote from Morgan Housel. He wrote a book called The Psychology of Money. And he said, you should plan on the plan not going according to plan. That's cute, right? You should plan on the plan not going according to plan. So we can do that as long as we have different strategies to be able to use. And for us, we are all about strategies. We'll go through several of those as we go through the presentation tonight.